Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week my guest is Belynda. Now, Belynda works in Marwell Zoo and she has a keen interest in conservation, more specifically on the conservation of birds of prey. So in this podcast we talk about generally, animals being endangered and breeding programs and things, as well as her work in Marwell Zoo. We talk about a lot of the birds of prey, eagles, falcons, hawks, that sort of thing. And we also talk about sort of the extinction of some insects and things, including obviously bees. And we speak about spiders. We also talk about creating our own zoo, ivory trade, poaching, all these sorts of things. So, it's very animal heavy on this podcast. So if that's your sort of thing, then listen on. Now, before we get started, I've got a promo from Bro Honey. They have a podcast called You're Weak and Stupid, which I really recommend to everyone. I think it's hilarious, where it's very, very not safe for work, a lot of swearing, and really no punches pulled. So if you like that kind of humour, definitely check those guys out. And then once that's played, it'll go straight onto the show. So I'll be back at the end to give more details and stuff. Be sure to like us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, especially Instagram. I post more content on there and give more context to a lot of things as well, with pictures and etc. So be sure to follow us on that. And yeah, I'll be back at the end.
Hi, I'm Alex from Your Week in Stupid, a comedy podcast where a group of friends explore the crazy and bizarre news from around the world each week. Plus, we tell some of our own stupid stories. So if you'd like to hear some stuff like this...
I know a kid that fell into a fryer at a Mac as well.
Wait. How do you fall into a fryer? Like, is he standing above the fryer?
Not like his whole body, but like... He was like part-time in the circus with his family, and he had to like...
Wait.
He kept just going past his...
And like this.
The article I read on this said that the aubergine got so far up there it almost touched his lung.
No. I've got an X-ray. I've got an X-ray here. But the thing is,
You just imagine that.
it's 30 centimeters long. That's like double the size of any eggplant I've seen. I don't know what they're grown in China.
Do that. The human body is fucking amazing.
And yeah, you know what? Some of this. Hold up.
Leather chaps.
You're telling me that my fantasy of gimps of the Caribbean is a thing?
Gimps of the Caribbean. It is absolutely a thing. You can go on a boat every year for the last 22 years. They've run a BDSM festival on this boat.
You can find Your Week in Stupid at www.brohoney.com and all our other fantastic shows, social media links, and all our information. Again, that's www.brohoney.com. Or search Your Week in Stupid on all major podcast apps. Don't become one of our news stories.
Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton. So, I've already started recording. So I'm joined today by Belynda, which is Wayne's sister. But in the intro, no doubt I'll go into details about all that sort of tomfoolery. But thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
That's all right. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So let's just kind of get a general idea. I want to get you on here because, much like Wayne, you have a lot of interesting things to say, and your profession is quite interesting as well. So what do you do, essentially?
Well, I work in Marwell Wildlife in the retail admissions side for the time being, but my general goal is to try and get into the bird keeping side of it, generally with birds of prey, because that's been my passion for many years since college, and I want to try and spruce up the idea to try and save the species, as well as getting the public more aware of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what sort of piqued your interest of essentially birds of prey? Like from a young age, did you ever do any falconry or anything like that, or was it just a sort of later thing? Or
I think it was sort of a later thing. So when I started Sparsholt College, we went to this little falconry as a trip, and when they allowed me to hold one of their Harris hawks, I just fell in love with it because it was a majestic bird, a true hunter with all these lovely talons and beaks, and it was such an animal to be trained that it was so easy just to get a love for it.
Yeah.
And you just think there's so many birds like this that are dying, and it's my job to save them.
Okay. What made you sort of start at Sparsholt College then? Did you Was it always a desire, because that's a more vocational college for obviously people who are from the local area? What were you studying in college, and what kind of led you to that?
I was studying animal management and just the basics in level 1 to start off with. So I wanted to just get the whole genre of like mammals and all the different groups together. Mm-hmm. And then as the years went on, when you upgraded to level 3, that's when you had like aquatics and then avian, which is your birds. And it's throughout that, they didn't have any birds of prey at Sparsholt, but they allowed us to do things like the practical side as well as the theory side. And the first time I started at the college, I was into animals just in general. Mm-hmm. But then, obviously, like growing with the birds now, I wanted to try and spruce that up a little bit more. And then it got through level 3, graduated, and now just trying to find a job in the actual bird handling.
I see. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's quite entertaining in the way that sort of your brother's obviously paleontologist in a sense. So he's got the degree in paleontology, and he's obviously into sort of all the animals and creatures that were extinct. And then you've also gone on you went to a vocational college, and then you did animal handling and things, and then now you're going into falconry. It's quite entertaining, the sort of parallels there between the two of you. But yeah, I mean, so with that, what was before you kind of got into the avian? How would you describe I'm terrible with these sort of things. Like avian animals? Was it what?
Yeah, the whole class of like birds is the avian class. So their classification, you'd say class avian.
I see. Okay, yeah, and is avian, is it canine, feline, bovine?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, well, cool. Yeah, see, I know little tiny bits of things about animals, but some of it's just straight over my head. With it then, before you got into the avian class, what made you go into animal management? Was it just from a young age you've just always liked animals specifically, or?
Yeah, well, when I first started at the Chamberlain School, I wanted to do animals in general, like all of the animals all together. Yeah. But obviously, trying it in school, when they just teach you all the basic and normally human related, you'd like, this is getting me nowhere because it teaches me nothing on animals. So once you go through that, you just went to like that day when they had the college interviews. Yeah. And then as soon as you saw Sparsholt, you think this is the perfect college for anybody who wants to do animal courses. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've got, there's a friend of mine who did a vocational course in Sparsholt. I can't remember what she was doing specifically, but I remember her sending me pictures of her, is it llamas or alpacas or something along those lines. They had some sort of creature like that was there. I remember her taking photos of and stuff that was quite adorable. And my cousin Charlotte, she's her job now is actually, she started her own company about dog walking and things like that. But she went to Sparsholt College because she wanted to be a veterinarian. Excuse me. And yeah, she wanted to be a veterinarian, but she ended up not going down that road because she said it was too painful to watch the animals, like you have to put down animals and that sort of thing, and she said she's too much of a mess for that sort of thing. But with animals and stuff, I like animals, obviously, I love them, I think they're great, better than humans most of the time, but I don't know if I'd want to work with them specifically. I mean, with the zoos and things like that, like I'd really want to, because you can get such a close attachment to a lot of them as well. But that's almost the crux of it. I know that I'd get so attached to some of these animals, and a lot of them wouldn't feel the same in regards to me. Like the sort of, they don't reciprocate that. Like, do you have any pets at all? We used to, but they're all gone, unfortunately.
I see. Okay. Are you intending on getting any sort of pets in the future?
I think when I get my own place, I might get like another little dog, but never cats. So I'm not really much of a cat person. Yeah, yeah. There are certain people who are kind of more into cats or dogs. But also, if you're going into sort of avian studies and things like that as well, that cats are probably quite counterintuitive to that. Even though I imagine that most hawks and I wonder, do you think the biggest birds of prey here would be able to? I don't think they do, but do you think they'd be able to attack a cat? I'd probably say in this country you'd be looking at something like your buzzard and your golden eagle. Golden eagle would definitely take a cat any day. Yeah. But a buzzard probably for protection of its young, if it's going to attack a cat. Yeah, yeah. Because there's like, obviously I've seen, is it peregrine falcon? Are they in England? Normally around Scotland areas, a bit up country. Yeah, and there's are kestrels in England as well? Yeah. Are they birds of prey? Yeah, let's see. I really don't know. I'm sprinkling my very vague knowledge about this sort of thing. But like I've seen, you do see birds of prey because my mate Alex Hart, he's really into. He's been on the podcast before. He's really into animals and outdoorsy things, that sort of stuff. So he knows, he can identify almost anything. Like, and whenever I drive he lives in Wales now, and if I ever
go up there and see him. We're walking around and go, oh, that's bird of prey. Oh, that's that. Oh, that's that. And he points them out, and you can see a lot of the time by birds when they're circling in certain ways of how they, you can tell when they're sort of looking to hunt or about to swoop and things like that, which is really cool. Do you have like a favourite in general of like birds? Like,
my favourite all-time bird has to be the bald eagle.
yeah.
It's just like, every time you see it, it's like a symbol of power, and it's a beautiful bird, and it's one of those, I know people say it's a symbol of America, but it's also an animal that's come through almost near the brink of extinction back into least concern. So it's one of those animals that have basically just said, screw it to Mother Nature.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things coming out now, which is more and more evidence supporting that a lot of birds, if not all of them, potentially came from dinosaurs as well. Of the whole, if the majority of dinosaurs were feathered as well, and then obviously once all these sort of extinction events occurred and that sort of thing, then like people say, like a chicken. A lot of people I've been hearing is saying like it's basically just a mini dinosaur. Like a chicken will just peck and kill anything. Like if you put like mice near like a group of chickens, they will rip it apart. They are brutal. Whereas you normally see a chicken, you go, just eats a bit of grain, maybe a few bugs, and like they're really vicious. But obviously they're only not even 1 foot tall, so small. It's like, yeah, dinosaurs and things. Just trying to link it back to with the conversation with Wayne. Have you both on here? Have a sibling podcast? But yes, with Marwell then, what if we get into how you got into that job? Because obviously you say you're currently in the retail sector of Marwell. Is that
Yeah, that's right.
So what? Obviously, what is that? What was that sort of? What do you do in that? Do you get to interact with any of the animals? Sort of, lay of the field.
Unfortunately, I don't get to interact with any of the animals. When it's the retail admission side, I basically am in charge of like selling the tickets on the gates and then selling stuff in like the gift shop and maybe a few times face painting.
Yeah.
I'm like a little kid.
Yeah.
But I find that my purpose in the job is as good as everybody else's because I'm also just getting the money off the people and also trying to upsell as much stuff as I can to raise awareness for the animals that are endangered in the zoo.
Mm-hmm. So with Marwell Zoo, obviously, I'm not expecting you to know everything about it. So if there's certain questions I ask and you're not sure, that's completely fine. But so you were telling me before the podcast, has it always been a charity, or has it recently become one, or what's the sort of status of it's sort of a general overview of what the status of the company is in general in the organisation, and then what it's doing, sort of thing, conservationally.
I think with Marwell Zoo, a couple of years ago, it was just like a normal zoo, and it had its like conservation donations, but it wasn't so much as like a charity, unless it was like 2 years ago, I'd say, that it became a charity. And then that's when the whole gift aiding started coming in. And I think that's why when you ask it for people, they get a little bit confused because it's not something that's been around for very long. Yeah.
So what, with do you know the reason why they decided to kind of make that change at all?
I think they wanted to try and make it more of a charity-wise, because then people have the option to give the donation and everything. It wasn't feel like it was being thrust upon them. Because if people feel like they have a choice to do it, they'll tend to do it more often. Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, that does seem to be... That's pretty much ubiquitous with anything. It's almost... You tell someone to do something and they want to do the opposite. That's just quite... Yeah. Especially when it's to do with money and things as well. Yeah. Well, with Marwell at the moment... I assume you probably still get to spend quite a bit of time in the park, like even just when you're not doing sort of the duties of the job. I assume you walk around and see the animals, that sort of thing, quite a lot. Your opinion on zoos in general, because I've spoken to a few people who have different opinions on zoos. Do you think, obviously it comes down to the zoo as an individual basis, I think Longleat's quite a shining example in this, but like, do you find that zoos generally are beneficial for animals, or do you think they're beneficial for animals or not? And we'll go from there.
My honest opinion on zoos, like, I agree with the whole having endangered species, like, say, an armour leopard that's only a few breeding pairs left in the wild, and trying to save them and bring them back to the brink of extinction. That I agree with. The only thing I don't agree with is having such lovely animals like that in small cages. Like, if I was to have, like, a zoo, it'd be something like in Africa, a massive safari, and have people, like, either patrolling it to protect it, and still keeping up with the breeding program.
Yeah, because there's quite a few things in Africa, for example. Like one of the hot topics is poaching. Well, obviously, if you have a safari with X amount, like let's say 100 elephants in there, and they've got like a really wide, huge miles and miles to sort of go around, but they're completely safe. Is that idea of if they've got enough room to sort of graze and that sort of things, would they be happier in a smaller area but no danger of poaching or other animals likely to kill them, or is it better to just kind of have them and leave them alone? And I think, as you say, with some of the endangered animals, it becomes a bit more complicated because, yeah, when there's so few left, if you have a leopard out there, someone is going to try and kill it, or it's going to die from, all the sort of natural means. And it is that hard line because there's certain animals where going back 100 or so years ago, well, not even 100, you can go back, 50 plus years ago, even 20, 30, before the internet was so widespread, and then obviously prior to that when TV wasn't so widespread, and etc., people could only really see animals by drawings, if you go back far enough, of just a drawing of an animal, or you have to have loads of money and be able to go and afford to go see it. And then zoos kind of came about, and they started to conserve some of the wildlife, and then obviously keep them so people could see it, and it's that sensationalism which can be some of the problems, where people want to cram in so many animals into so many small spaces, and it's just like, would people really be happy? So when you get creatures like cheetahs or leopards who can run so fast, so far, and then you have got them in a place where they basically can't even reach top speed of running because there's not enough space for them, it can be it's a grey area, I find, with conservation of animals and things. I do find it's a hard one, because there are a lot of zoos, because I've seen a lot of things on Longley, because I think they have that show on TV about Longley where there's like a huge program behind them where they are one of the zoos that is trying to push forward and do all these sorts of other things of trying to keep things from extinction, do all that sort of jazz. Does Marwell do that sort of thing as well, do you know of?
The only things I'm ever been aware of in the Marwell breeding side is they breed all their big cats, so like the Armour leopards and the Armour tigers, which are the most endangered cats we got. And then sometimes they'll try and breed, like we've got 2 young white rhinos at the moment, and they're thinking of breeding those ones.
Okay. Because
obviously how rhinos are struggling at the moment. And I know that they're trying to get in touch with other zoos to try and spruce up the whole fact of other endangered species as well. Like with Chester Zoo, they got black rhinos at the moment, and now that black rhinos are extinct in the wild, it's more important for the zoos to try and spruce them up again.
Yeah, I
Same
see.
with our oryx. The oryx are extinct in the wild, and our main Marwell project is to get them back out as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, look, with a lot of the people who work in the zoos as well, do you find, like, most of them generally, I know you may not interact with all the ones that are animal handlers specifically, but do you find they're all quite passionate about, with that sort of job, it's not, I'm working this job because I need money, it's more likely that I'm working this job because I actually care about animals. Do you find that's generally the way it is?
I find that, yeah. Most of the keepers I've worked with, I've met a couple of the hoofstock people, and they have such a passion to try and save as many animals as they can. Because it's like last year we had like a baby wild ass, but unfortunately the male got a bit aggressive and he killed it, and many keepers were so upset because it was the first time in about 40 years we had like a wild ass born in the zoo, and just a tragedy like that can change such a future in a minute.
That's pretty dark, and that's one of the things about the animal kingdom that, like, one of the arguments being, I'd like to get your 2 cents on hunting, actually, in general. You can look back to some of the other points. I brought this point up when I spoke with Wayne as well, and it's regarding hunting in, say, conservation, more so what America's sort of line of doing it of, you get big grazing land, you get people going there and killing deer to keep the population down, and then the amount of money you spend on it, you get tags, and then that money you make helps conservation. Are you generally more for that sort of thing, or against it, or what's your sort of opinion on hunting and that sort of how it can be beneficial to conservation, or how it can be damaging?
I kind of agree with that topic of like culling down animals for overgrazing, because we've had situations where you have one animal that's overpopulated and it will overgraze, and then it will get rid of a certain prey item, which then leads to an extinction of a predator. So that I can completely agree with. Yeah. It's just the whole poaching for furs and black market, that's what I completely disagree with. Yeah. It's about kind of like the value of a life in a sense of what is it worth. And if you look at it utilitarian wise, you can say, okay, don't necessarily want to kill these 100 deer, but if we kill these 100, then these 1,000 are going to survive. And one thing that got brought up in a podcast I was listening to where they were discussing this, which I hadn't thought of, is the way things die in nature a lot of the time is actually really unpleasant and really painful and awful. Like, not we should go out and kill everything because it's more humane, but obviously, like, with a deer, for example, they will get mauled by wolves or other predators and things like that, or get diseased or eventually starve, whereas, there's that argument which is just an arrow or a bullet just
if the person's trained right and they're doing the right thing and that sort of thing, it can be over immediately, which can be beneficial. But then there's the thing of, I think it's more so in Africa when you have trophy hunting. And so what's your views on sort of trophy hunting and then that sort of thing?
With trophy hunting, I disagree with it, because it's like somebody goes out and kills an animal, yeah, whoop-de-doo, you killed an animal, but now in that response, it's going to be lead there with leads in it, which then if vultures come along, that can then lead to lead poisoning, in which you've just killed an endangered species, so really you've gained nothing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, with a lot of the way these animals are obviously killed, if they're not, it has to be an organised way of doing things in a sense. There have to be rules that are specifically set, because with I think it's lions, they do it where obviously a lot of people like to trophy hunt lions, and I don't agree with that. I think, when you kill an animal, it should be either to help the species, or it should be, as well as helping the species, like with deer, you kill a deer, use as meat, that sort of thing. It can be very helpful. Or you can leave it there for the rest of the creatures in the wild and things. But with trophy hunting of like lions and things, the meat, I don't know what lion meat is like. I don't think. Do you know of anywhere that eats like feline meat, as in anything like that?
I know that a few African tribes used to eat like lion meat, but I don't think it was very popular, only because it doesn't really agree with like the human stomach. It kind of like bounds up really easily.
I see. Yeah, because I don't know anything about. I just came to my head then that I don't think I've ever heard of anyone eating tiger or anything like that. Like I've heard about quite a few other things being eaten. Like you get people who are like bears, and they like kill bear meat, and apparently bear meat can be quite tasty if made in the right way and that sort of thing. But it's with cats, I don't think I've ever heard of anyone even killing and eating a normal cat. That question never seems to come up. I think. I mean, I've heard people even cooking and eating like squirrel and mice and rat, but yeah, it must be obviously, as you say, it doesn't agree with the human stomach. But I'd never even thought about that. Like that. About eating cats. It's really weird me thinking about it, like eating like a lion leg.
Yeah, it's like the only thing I know that people do eat cats is I know it's really sick, but they eat the balls.
Okay.
Like in Chinese medicine, it's supposed to be really good for you, but I don't know if science are actually looking into it. It's supposed to give like your hormones a little bit of a trigger, but in general of medicine, it doesn't actually work to the point of what they're saying it should do.
I see. Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, there's quite a few things like that. I think there's the venom or the sting from a certain type of wasp or hornet. It can be used to cure cancer. Not used to cure cancer, that makes it sound so grandiose, but there's parts within that compound which have a sort of effects on the potential remission of cancer and things like that. So it's all these parts of the animal kingdom of things that we haven't explored and haven't looked at. So that makes sense. And obviously, I think the testicles contribute to a body. When creatures have hormones and that sort of thing, obviously having testicles or ovaries and obviously other differences between the genders do affect hormones. So eating the genitals of a cow, affecting hormones, that does make sense. Yeah, do you know what you said? And you said some African tribes. Did you say that was?
Yeah, I'm not sure which ones they were, but I know that a few of them used to eat things like some wildcat, some like gazelle, and some bits here and there, but they do say that you have to cook it in the right way for it to be an actual meal. Because obviously when you've got your big cats and they eat just protein, you probably get a few things from it, but I don't think it would be good eating it in a way as much as it would as a deer.
Yeah. Is there any like an animal that you'd always like to try eating out of interest?
I know that one of my friends in Australia, she tried kangaroo, and that was supposed to be nice, but I don't know if I want to, only because there's certain animals to be eaten, and then there's just animals that you don't really want a chance, especially with like all these monsters inside me things, all these parasites going around.
Yeah, I've seen that show. Yeah, some of that stuff is freaky when you get that sort of thing. We've seen like small things like, obviously with the shrimp / prawns, you have to sort of take their sort of organs, their digestive tract out, essentially, all skip it out, because there's a lot of the time there can be parasites in that as well, and it's gross to think about, but it also is scary. I've tried kangaroo meat. It's all right. Well, I had Iceland kangaroo burgers, so obviously you don't know. It seemed quite gamey in a lot of ways.
Oh, right.
So because I tried their venison burgers, their ostrich burgers, and their kangaroo burgers, and they were all good, but I found none of them were good as sort of the normal standard beef burger. Be like exotic. Have you tried any crazy exotic animals of interest?
I think they got us to try some snake before it. I think it was on our Scotland trip. They got us to try some snake, and to be honest, it just tasted like chicken. I couldn't taste any other difference between it. But it wasn't very filling either. It was probably like eating like a strip of chicken from a sandwich. That's pretty much it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I haven't had frog's legs personally, but I've heard that they taste like chicken as well. But I don't know if everything tastes like chicken. Who knows? Maybe it's like the base. Maybe chicken tastes of nothing, and then everyone's in some sort of mass hysteria about it. I do love chicken though. But with the I had my train of thought, and it's kind of disappeared. Something about eating chicken and snakes and stuff now as well. Because we're talking about conservation and sort of Marwell Zoo and things like that. You're telling me before the podcast that you're doing some volunteering at the same time as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I've taken volunteering at this place called Falcon High, which is basically one of those places that do either Winchester shows, school parties, or even weddings where they just fly the birds in general. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty much a place for retirement birds. So at the moment we've got a peregrine falcon who's just come out of pest control retirement.
Okay.
So really our place is just for old or birds that people don't really want, and we can just give them time to train for just the shows and obviously for little kids to understand them and everything.
Yeah. I assume they quite enjoy that because obviously with them it's their sort of their base natural instinct is to fly around, hunt, do this, that and the other, and if you can sort of get them to do a lot of these things and then feed them for it anyway, it's probably very good for them rather than them just being kind of, if they're quite old and stuff, being kind of left to it. Because I imagine if they've been used for pest control, these sorts of other things, then they're too domesticated. Is that, I don't know anything about birds, so like, from what your knowledge is, do you know if there is a thing like obviously with a lot of animals here, like a standard pets like dogs, cats, these sort of things, if you just let them free, a lot of the time they'll end up just dying because they're domesticated. Are birds like that as well?
I'd probably say, like, when we first got Frank, we had the option to let him, they had the option to let him go, but when the owner came back to us, he said it probably wouldn't be wise because he's so trained to catch the pigeons, but just to drop them back to people, he wouldn't actually go and eat them.
Right.
So if he had that mentality still, probably after a while we would actually starve. Because he's been so trained with that behaviour, he wouldn't know any other behaviour to do.
I see. So with pest control, what sort of, obviously you just mentioned pigeons, is it generally like they kill flying pests, or do they, I know obviously birds of prey do kill things like mice and that sort of stuff, but I didn't know they were used for pest control.
Yeah, sometimes in Wales and Scotland they have peregrine falcons flying around airports because sometimes pigeons will get trapped in plane, what they called
the engines.
Yeah. And it obviously causes trouble. So what they then do is hire someone with a falcon to come and kill a few pigeons every week or so, and then that kind of makes it easy for airports and saves like pigeons getting stuck in engines and everything.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that is. I didn't think about that really. I mean, do you know what other sort of professions sort of these birds have? Because apart from birds of prey shows, I'm not sure I've seen any of them handled by humans.
I think some other people have, like, sometimes with our 2 Harris hawks we have, we sometimes use them for our own pest control as well. Mm-hmm. So certain farmers in Winchester will pay the person in charge of our falconry place to bring the Harris hawks and get rid of rabbits for him.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a nature way of getting rid of them. It's not poison, it's not lead, and the Harris hawks can kill them easily and quickly and kill multiple ones of them in one day, whereas poison would only kill like 1 or 2 in a night.
Yeah, and obviously there's also that thing of all the other things that the poison can affect and kill, and I'm sure poison is very good for the ecology of the environment either. So yeah, that's a good point. I mean, with and with some of these birds and things, do you find, like with dogs and cats, they have sort of general personalities, or do you find that it's more species wise is where the personalities kind of come from?
I think they have their own personalities. Like, if the birds have been used in pest control, they're a bit more intimidating, more aggressive. So like with our falcons, you'd never feed them with your hands because obviously they've been trained to just strike at it and kill it.
Yeah.
So we always feed them with that swinging thing that you sometimes see in hawk shows.
Okay.
And then with your smaller barn owls, because they've been so bred in captivity and tamed and everything, those would be the ones that you'd like to stroke and obviously handle. So all of them have their own personalities, but the ones that have come back from like pest control or even people that never used to fly them are a bit more intimidating with us.
I see. Are there any sort of with the birds of prey and things? Is there anything you know of that people basically steer clear of? Any animals that I imagine they're all trainable, but are there any over here where people just say we can't train them, like a species in particular, or is it?
I know it sounds very crazy, but the snowy owl is actually one that we don't take, only because you can train it, but it's highly aggressive. So one day it could go so aggressive that it would actually attack its owner.
Right.
So if you ever fly snowy owls like the Hawk Conservancy does, you have to be someone who's got them from a chick age and bred them, and obviously trained them up from a young age, and then they would be safe. But if you got them just from an adult, they highly don't recommend it because they're just such aggressive birds.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's weird with birds. I mean, one thing with owls that I found, because owls are one of my favourite animals in general, really, especially the I think it's the white barn owl. But the thing is with owls is they're very, very. I think I spoke about this in the podcast with Wayne and Josh briefly, but it's like their eyes are so huge that their brains are actually really small. So like as far as intelligence wise, the owls aren't actually that intelligent as you think they are proportionally with their head size, because so much of their sort of brain is used for I think it's the cerebral cortex, seeing with your eyes. And then obviously they have such big eyes as well. It takes up so much space in their head, and they can't actually turn their neck. They can't look away with their eyes. Can't move anywhere. They can have to. That's why they can turn their head 360 degrees almost. So I think I love owls. I think owls are so cool, and they're nocturnal hunters and things, and they look so almost cute in a way. And then you see them hunt, and they're just machines. They would just slaughter things. So yeah, with the sort of the falconry things, what do you want to do? Like you're delving into that sort of profession, and you said you want to kind of help them out a little bit in a sense. So if you had like a game plan of the next 5 years, sort of example sake, what's the sort of general goal here for you?
General goal for me is to get into a place with the falconry and first of all get the word out to the public on what species need saving and what species are okay at the time being, and then try and figure out a way to raise money to make sort of conservation sites like either breeding programs or protected sites, which let's say for example the marsh harrier with wetlands, we're losing a lot of the wetlands, so we could try and make one out of agriculture and then just bring it up for a breeding site, and then obviously get more word out to people to save it, so keep it like protected with laws and welfare acts, that kind of thing, and then actually just try and get the list, like say like IUCN Red List, where they got the panda from vulnerable to endangered, so they increased it. Yeah. We kind of want to do the same with the birds of prey that generally need it.
Yeah. So are there quite a few birds of prey that are susceptible in a sense of like there's reasoning behind that? Is it because of deforestation, or is there a specific cause, or is it? Yeah.
With a lot of birds of prey, it's either habitat loss or lack of prey, because obviously due to habitat destruction, their prey then goes, and then the birds end up dying themselves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously, especially when they lose a lot of their habitat as well, then I imagine obviously if you have a lot of, you might have like a certain area that's got a high concentration of this type of predator, and then obviously as it's less spread out, as the habitat gets more and more destroyed, that the reach of where all these animals can be is made smaller, and then the area is just smaller and smaller, and eventually there's only a small area and there's all these birds, and then they obviously either kill all the prey and then they start to starve, or there's just too many birds to be able to handle it. Do you find birds of prey, from your knowledge of them, are very aggressive to each other? Because I think obviously it's weird that when you see about I think it's the eagle, not the eagle, the falcons killing pigeons and things like that, like what. Oh no, pigeons is a bird of prey. But do sort of the bigger the bird, or was it will just kill anything, including birds, or was there sort of certain birds that will kill only rabbits or something? Anything like that you know of?
I've known that a few bigger birds of prey, say like eagles, will actually kill some kestrels sometimes if food is like very scarce. But one thing we always find as well is they kind of take advantage of each other. So one time they had in America when an osprey had a fish, the sea eagles were then like intimidating it and like trying to knock it out of its talons, and they will use that to their advantage. So they'll either will kill smaller birds than them size, or they'll actually just steal their food from them, and that's when competition comes a problem for the smaller birds of prey.
So with have you been to sort of many other zoos and things like around the UK or around the world at all, of just
The only other zoos that I'm aware of, I've been to Edinburgh Zoo in Scotland when I went on a Scotland trip, Highland Wildlife Park, the Isle of Wight Zoo, Amazon World, and I think it was Chessington Zoo.
Okay.
But the one zoo I do want to investigate is Chester Zoo, because that's got its massive breeding program and a real good connection with us at Marwell as well.
Okay, yeah. So with obviously you said I think earlier in the podcast, obviously a lot of what Marwell's trying to do, especially with the breeding programs, is trying to collaborate with other zoos to kind of bring the animals' numbers up and things. I mean, I assume, have you been to Longleat as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been to Longleat and Marwell, and then all the other ones that you named. Well, I assume you've been to Marwell because you work there. I've been to a couple of them. I've been to Drusilla's Zoo, which I think. I can't remember exactly where that is, but it's still the south of England and things, but they have like a lot of lemurs and that sort of thing as well, so I do love lemurs. With like animals, for example, obviously you said about owning a dog. Like, would you, if you could choose like any animal to own in a zoo, like what would you sort of have out of interest?
If I was to have a zoo, I would have it like Amazon World has, where all of their species are endangered species. Mm-hmm. That way, it's getting people to know that all of our species here are endangered. Mm-hmm. These are the ones that need saving. So if you want to adopt or save them, you can have the option, and you don't have to worry about money just going to an animal that doesn't need it, like giraffes and meerkats, say.
Yeah. It's funny with meerkats, because meerkats are so popular a lot of the time, because obviously they compare the meerkat adverts and everyone loves them, and I've been to quite a few meerkat feeding things, but yeah, they're not endangered creatures at all. They're doing quite well for themselves. So what sort of endangered creatures have you got in mind that you know of that are quite... I know a lot of sort of rhinos and things. Obviously a lot of the time the ivory have got issues because of poaching, and obviously a lot of the big cats due to poaching as well. So are there sort of other ones that you can think of?
I know that it's either the 3-toed or the 2-toed sloth. I'd like to get one of those in, because I know they're quite endangered. There's a couple of like your insects and your arachnids that you would like to save.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a few birds of prey. There's mostly the Philippine eagle. I absolutely love that bird, but there's only like 20 breeding pairs left because it's so restricted. And I would actually love to get like a whole genre of things, like your mammals, birds, reptiles, and also fish and everything, because then it spruces it up a little bit and it's not controlled with just one certain range of animals.
I see, yeah. Yeah, it's I didn't realise that insects, that many insects were endangered. Are there any that you can think of off the top of your head?
Can't remember it off by heart, but it's like a bush cricket or something. It's the only cricket I know of that's quite hairy, and it lives in the Philippines, and there's only like a couple. I think it's on the critically endangered list.
Oh wow, okay, yeah, I see. That's pretty mad. I mean, I didn't realise with insects, I didn't realise they almost took stock of that sort of thing, and not they shouldn't, because I think insects are generally, I mean, they deserve the right to live as much as anything else does on this planet. But yeah, I didn't even think about insects being endangered. I don't think I've even ever really heard about it. I mean, I think I said that this year that some of the ladybirds are a bit scarce, because I think some of the ladybirds that are coming in from other countries or something, they're basically kind of eating some of our ladybirds. I don't know if you know anything about that. I've heard that in passing. I just know little bits about everything and don't know any details about anything.
Yeah, it's same with the ladybirds, and the same with our bees as well. The Australian bee has been a nuisance because it's come over our country and it's out competing our native bumblebees. Mm-hmm. So every time you see a bumblebee with an orange butt, you know that's the Australian one, not one of our native ones. Right,
okay. Yeah, I didn't know that at all. I knew it did with ladybirds, but I didn't know with bees. It's one of those things with I assume you're probably on the same page with Wayne on the whole the climate change issue and that sort of thing, of that sort of mindset of we want to try and save the world by not destroying everything, and then also one thing that people don't think about when they are destroying the environment and they go, oh well, it'll be fine, we'll just deal with it later, or humans will survive. It's like the amount of change that's happening that is affecting animals is just... It was horrendous. It's like, so do you have any thoughts or strong opinions on that?
I kind of think like we're digging ourselves a hole here, because like if we grow to like get rid of all the animals on this planet, say like if we got rid of our bees for one, if bees went extinct, it's actually been proven that the human population would die out in a few weeks, because obviously there's nothing to pollinate the flowers, we don't get food, and our animals that we eat don't get food, we die eventually. And there's also like, say like you had certain herbivores and predators, they've been on the planet for several years or so. If we got rid of those, the planet would eventually have nothing to sustain it. So like vultures, they're mostly important for getting rid of carrion and getting rid of diseases in Africa. as soon as they're gone, Africa's going to swarm with disease, that'll spread globally, and then that's the population gone.
Wow. Yeah. It's a fragile balance of us and nature that we like to think that because we're the ones who are in control specifically, that we're in general idea of control, but we are kind of more, we have the biggest impact. We're not actually in control. It's more, we can cause the most damage and do the most good because of our sort of conscious nature mixed with technology, both for the good and the bad. But it is a weird one with, if we basically, you can take out certain creatures out of the sort of ecological system and it'll mess up everything. As you see, bees, I've heard a lot about bees. I think they pollinate like 90-something% of everything. I think wasps do a few, but the amount that wasps do is so incomparable to the amount that bees do. I think it's like one or two specific sort of species of wasp just kind of do it occasionally, and I don't think they do it in the same way that bees do. I think bees communicate with the plants through, I think it's a sort of electromagnetic communication that way. I'm terrible with this sort of thing. Do you know anything about that?
I think it's like color coding, so it's like the pheromones that are released from the flowers, and they can like detect. And then sometimes when the bees find flower patches, they send out pheromone signals to the others.
I see. Yeah, pheromone signals. That makes a lot more sense. I know with like wasps and hornets, when they sting you, it leaves the pheromone telling other things in the area, you should attack this thing because it's clearly an enemy. And that's one of the things that I tell people: if you have like a wasp or hornet in your house, try and get it out. Try not to kill it, because if you kill it and squash it, then the pheromone can get released, and then people nearby, they're like, well, wasps and hornets nearby, they scent that. They sense the pheromone, and then they're like, okay, let's go over here because clearly something killed something of ours. We'll go investigate to see if there's like an enemy we can handle. There's like when you said about bees as well. One thing I remember seeing on YouTube was I think it was a hornet flew into like a beehive, and I can't remember what type of bee it is, but they all climb over it and vibrate, and they do the heat thing.
Yeah, it's on a David Attenborough show. I can't remember if it was Life in the Undergrowth or like Life on Earth, but it was like a scout hornet, and I think it was honeybees. What they do is they swarm around it and, like you said, vibrate, and they cause so much heat that they actually burn the hornet alive.
That's crazy, isn't it? It's mad. Yeah, I mean, with so with a lot of the other animals that you work with, are there any sort of, I know that some of the avian class are some of your favourites. Are there any other animals that you just really think are great, just a really cool top of the line animals?
I think what I really like, I know it's really weird coming from a girl, but I actually like spiders and all that.
Okay, yeah.
Because I just find them so interesting, and there's not little information that's been taught about them, even with the whole put a chestnut in your window and it keeps the spiders out. You think, well, is anybody actually researching this, or does anybody care to research it? Yeah. It's just one of those things that get left aside, and you think, well, let's do this. Let's get an animal that no one actually cares about and get so much information about it.
So what sort of things about spiders do you know of that you think are quite cool?
Sort of their hunting techniques. So you watch on David Attenborough and it's amazing. There's like a net casting spider which will fold a web in its front legs and actually catch the fly by just throwing the net on it.
Oh, wow.
And then you've got your bolus spider that kind of swings its web round and then throws it like a lasso.
Oh, okay. That's amazing.
So all of their different hunting techniques, and the best thing about it is they never get taught it. So where does that behaviour come into tact? And it just amazes me that something that small is intelligent to make like a web of its own without even the slightest bit of teaching.
Yeah. And I don't know with spiders. I think in the insect world, with their young, they basically, I think they're not very maternal or paternal. I think it's kind of like their young kind of basically exist and then leave, almost, in a sense. I know that with mosquitoes, for example, they just lay their eggs normally by lakes and things, and then the females take human blood to feed to not just human blood, but other animals' blood as well. But when they bite us, they take the blood to put it on their young's larva and things, and then the blood seeps through the eggs essentially and feeds the larva, or something. That's layman's terms, I think. But with spiders and things, I mean, a lot of people get worried and freaked out by spiders, but like they kill so many creatures. Like in this house, for example, we have a few spiders in some of the corners. Actually, you can see cobwebs. And the people before have said there's not like loads. There's not like people who obviously are only listening. They can't see. There's not spiders everywhere or anything like that. There's just one or two in maybe each room. But I never want to get rid of them because they do kill flies and things like that. And with the spiders as well, I remember Like, a lot of people are terrified of tarantulas. Like, would you ever want to... Have you ever held a tarantula or stroked one, anything like that?
Yeah, I've held a tarantula before. It's the weirdest thing because it's so light, but it just feels like these tiny little finger bits going over your hand. But you have to be always aware because if you start shaking your hand, obviously they're so sensitive and blind, they'll take it the wrong way. So when you do handle one, you just have to be absolutely calm and try to keep your hands as steady as possible. I know when people like have really shaky hands, probably not wise to hold one.
I see. Okay. And when you are they tarantulas then? Is it tarantulas or spiders? Are they all got quite bad vision, or is it just specific ones?
I think it's all spiders in general. Like they obviously they have eyes, but they don't have the best vision for when it's coming to like getting their food and everything. It's like me and Wayne recently discovered that how they smell. They've got these little tubes on the end of their legs, and that's actually how they smell as well.
Oh, really?
So that's why they put their front legs out in their web, and they're plus feeling for vibrations, but also smelling at the same time.
Wow.
So mostly it's smell and vibration that is their keen senses, but the eyes are just there for, well, they're not even there for a reason, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it's a bit like sharks, isn't it? I know sharks have got atrocious eyesight, and obviously their main thing is their smell. I also know that this isn't obviously a predator, but like flies, I think they taste with their feet or something like that, and I think they spit out... They almost puke on their food and they basically guzzle it back up again, which is gross and horrendous. But is there a spider that does something similar to that? That wraps up its prey and then spits acid down through its mouth or something?
It's sort of like digestive enzymes. So when they bite them with the venom, that obviously kills it. And then once they start eating it, they'll spew out digestive enzymes to like mush up the meat, and that's how they can like soak it up like a liquid.
That's gross but amazing. Nature is so cool. So brutal but so cool. Would you ever want to own a tarantula then? Or did someone own a tarantula when you were younger and that kind of got you into it? Because a lot of people are normally just like, no thank you.
I used to have a friend at school that used to own a tarantula, but I don't think I'd own one myself, only because they're so complicated to take care of.
Yeah. I mean, Reese, he was talking about getting one at one point, but he said he looks into it and it's like, a lot of people don't know if you drop a tarantula only a couple of feet, you kill them. And people often freak out about tarantulas, but I think they're quite generally slow moving, especially compared to other things that are that size. Whereas, like the English house spider, I think that's like the fastest spider in the world, excluding one that can basically cartwheel. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, it's a golden wheel spider.
There you go. So you know about that. And I think the standard running speed is like the British house spider is like one of the fastest. So, yay. When you mentioned before we were talking about like false widows and things like that, like do you know much about false widows or black widows or why we've suddenly got an outburst of them over here?
As far as I'm aware, I know that false widows have like come over from like ships and planes on like the fruit collection that every spider normally comes on.
Yeah.
But what's happening now is that we did have false widows in the UK naturally, but they are the non-venomous ones. So now we got ones that are venomous. It's really tricky to tell the two apart. What I always find is that every widow has the sort of P-shaped abdomen, whereas our native UK ones will have a slight pointed edge to their abdomen.
Right,
so
okay.
Always don't go by just their colour markings, always go by the shape of their abdomen as well. Because obviously every species has different characteristics, and same with the black widow, it may be almost exactly like the false widow, but it has different coloration, different hexagon-shaped markings on its abdomen. So it's always trying to find those characteristics to pick out which ones come into contact.
I see, yeah. I just generally try to stay away from most of them, if I'm being honest. I was like, well, if they're not bothering me, then I'll probably live. With working in a zoo and things like that, like, if you could have any job in the zoo specifically, as in, I know you're looking into sort of aviation, the avian class animals. No experience was an issue or anything like that. Would you then just be an avian handler, or would you sort of want to diversify and do other things? Like what would be the ultimate goal? Like I know you said previously about you do want to help conservation and things, but is it just you want to go for the avian class because that's the one thing you're more specifically either concerned about conservationally, or is it due to the personal interest of it being the animal, being the birds, and then kind of that I explained that very badly.
The best thing I'd like to do, this might be like loads of years in time, I'd like to start off with the birds and be like a bird handler for a few years, and then I'd like to do just different subjects, so maybe like entomology and insects, and then go to mammals, and then maybe even fish and aquatics. Would like to spruce myself up with different species, because then that way you could have like the whole conservation but with different bits in total as well, and then you could say at the end of my life, I'm 60 years old, I've saved this amount of species, I'm happy.
I see. Is there something that specifically sparks this intrigue in saving the animals?
Most of it was from David Attenborough, seeing so many of his shows and seeing how far he's come with getting all the TV shows out and all the stuff passion he's put into it. It's just raised awareness of like how many animals we are killing a day, and just somebody else to help David Attenborough kind of spread the word, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, maybe you could be the next. You could be the next David Attenborough. Maybe we'll see in 10 years down the line, you'll be working for the BBC, and that'd be awesome. If you do that, I'd love to come and see it. That'd be so good. But I do love David Attenborough. He's a national treasure. Obviously, when he passes away, which I imagine will be in the next decade or so, because he's really old, it's going to be a tragedy. But the amount of people he got into, sort of nature and things like that, I mean, it's changed generations of people sort of getting into that sort of field, because he makes it, it's not just him, obviously there's a whole team of people behind him as well that do it as well, but he's kind of the face and the figurehead of the sort of BBC. I mean, I don't think I know of really, apart from, there's a few people who do like Walking with Dinosaurs and a few other things, but are there that many others who do present wildlife shows in Britain?
In Britain, I know that there's a guy called Chris, I can't remember his last name, but he did the World's Deadliest Predators.
Oh yes, I've heard of that.
And then there's that Spring Watch that my friend watches with those 3 people. I can never remember their names.
Yeah.
But they do like just UK species in general.
Okay.
And then it's more like if you've got like survival shows, like I always forget their names, but you've got like other survivalists. But Chris is the only person I know that does like other animal shows in the UK.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'd love personally also to do that as well. I mean, going around and seeing all the sort of the crazy animals and all the things. I mean, it makes me think like how much. Let's try that sentence again. One of the things that I imagine you found when you were learning more so about animals is that almost everything that you learn about them, you kind of learn one new fact about them, then you learn 100 things that we have no idea about. Like, did you find that was the case generally when you've been kind of learning more about creatures?
Yeah, like the first time I started off in college, I've learned so much about certain species. It's like blown my mind. And sometimes you learn all this good stuff, and then you learn all of your stuff that kind of puts you off them. So like they're so unpredictable, and all their behaviour could just change instantly. It just surprises you, because the amount of things that you learn from college, and then you're learning of today that they're discovering new species.
Yeah,
it's still going on. That's what intrigues me.
I see. Are there any things that any sort of animals that you had a sort of thought about, and then you either looked more into it, or you came into contact with them at the zoo or anything like that, and it changed your perspective on them at all?
I kind of had one, it was the most randomest thing, but I had a book that was given me as a birthday present of World's Strangest Creatures, and there was something in there called a blobfish.
Oh, okay.
It's the freakiest looking thing you've ever seen, but I went and studied it, and unfortunately, because it's such a rare fish, not much information's been on it. So you think to yourself, a really strange creature like this, and I never even knew about it till this day.
I think I've seen a picture of the blobfish. I think it's like almost like a human face melted, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've seen that. Yeah, I remember. I mean, you go. I think me and Wayne and Josh talking about this, but like you go quite far down to the ocean. Like you go. I know the blobfish isn't necessarily deep sea, but you go deep sea with some of the creatures in the ocean, and they are terrifying. Like some of them are just like aliens almost. They look so terrifying. But so obviously avian being the key thing, but is it, as you said, you want to delve into some of the sort of the other, I don't know how to describe it, areas of animals, I guess. You have the avian and stuff. Like, have you looked much into marine and things? Like, did you used to go to aquariums very much, or in your sort of animal management studies at Sparsholt, were there many things to do with marine as well?
Not a lot. Obviously there was a class with like aquatics, but that was more of your fishery stuff.
Yeah.
So obviously when we went into animal management, there was one side that was just fishing. So people would be taught how to fish, how their sharks and rays come into contact. And then obviously you had your farming department, which is your cows and your pigs and everything. So each one had different departments. But unfortunately, when you're at Sparsholt, you can only do like one for each year. And that's what makes it the tricky bit. They don't actually go into each department or anything like that.
Yeah, more of an overview. What does animal management actually teach you out of interest? Like, what sort of things do you learn in animal management?
Animal management, you learn your basics like your animal husbandry, animal feeding, the biology, and then sort of like characteristics of certain ones and adaptations. So that would be your domestic and wild. Then you'd have like your practical animals where they got kennels, cattery, birds, rodents, small mammals and exotics. And when we got to level 3, that's when they started taking us into the farm bit for like cows and pigs in case you wanted to work in a zoo. It'd be something for like almost like a buffalo and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Only problem with that is because these are such domesticated animals, it kind of defeats the point of an actual buffalo, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can understand that. I see. So, with is there anything specific that you learned that you can think of off the top of your head from the animal management sort of side of things that would actually be is actually really helpful, would be notable for anyone else who isn't sort of delving into that yet?
Probably the most thing I learned, it was quite a gory one, it was we were dissecting piglets.
Okay.
I mean, the first one I had was a stillborn and nothing was formed, so we had to get rid of that one.
Yeah.
And then once our lecturer kind of like showed us the inside of it, she did something horrible, like cut open its trachea, and she kind of showed how like the lungs work for a pig.
Oh wow.
And she got this tube thing and just breathed into it. Obviously didn't breathe back, otherwise she would have swallowed blood.
Yeah.
But seeing just like how the pig's lungs work compared to a human's, it's quite different because obviously a piglet, it kind of can like contract a bit faster because the muscles are a bit different. But just seeing that, you just think to yourself, it's quite amazing to see an actual inside of an animal as well. Instead of just learning about it, it's better to see it with your own eyes.
There's actually a museum in Amsterdam which I haven't been to, but I'm going to Amsterdam later this year that I want to go to. Later this year, and I want to go to this museum because 2 of my friends just came back from there and went there. It's called, I think it's Bodyworks, and what it is, they've basically got humans which they've preserved in certain conditions. I don't know the specifics, but they basically cut a lot of them in half, as in, so you can see things on the inside. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. So, like, there's one that I was being spoken about, where it's got someone's face, and you've got their whole head, and they basically cut the head off, and then cut it in half, like, down the nose, and then they put the head next to itself, one part facing forward and the other part 90 degrees.
Oh, wow.
So you can actually see the details of all the insides of it. And they've done that with, there's one which was 2 people having sex, and they basically sliced down the side of that so you can actually see what's going on. And there's one which was, it's because the piglet thing made me think of it. There's one which is, obviously it could be, if someone saw this in real life, it could be a trigger warning, but it was of babies in different fetal stages. Yeah, so it's like, it's called the Bodyworks Museum, and it's actual human things in there, so and you can see, Reese was telling me, there's a brain there where it's got all the nervous system coming out, so you can see everything. Yeah,
That's
I know.
Incredible.
It's mad to be able to see that, and I was thinking, like, the brain seeing that, it would be so weird. Like, you're looking at it, and your mind's going a bit, there's something wrong here, because the brain never should really see the brain, in theory, you know? And he said there was a few others as well. He said there was one that's, one of my things, not many things cringe me out, or get me grossed out in that many ways. Eyes, I'm not a fan of horrible things happening to eyes, but kidneys, for example. Like, I can eat, and I'm gonna try and eat like a lot of different food, a lot of variety, but when it comes to offal, you know, the organs of animals, I'm not that keen on them. But kidneys, I can't. Like, if I look at a kidney and I try to put a fork in a kidney on a plate, and it makes my kidneys in my stomach feel awful. And he saw this thing which was, it was a male genitalia, and it had it connected to the bladders and connected to the kidney, like fully out, like you could see it all. And it's crazy. I really want to go there and see that sort of thing. I think it'd be really interesting to see that of lots of other animals as well, like how different things work, because I know that pigs, the internal biology of them is quite similar in a lot of ways to humans. I think they're talking about even doing transplants or something from pigs. Do you know anything about that at all?
Not a lot. That's more in like the farming things. I know they were thinking of like doing transplants with certain pigs, but I'm not sure what they're actually going for.
Yeah, I wasn't fully sure. I think I've just heard sort of whispers and rumours about that sort of thing as well. But yeah, I mean, is there anything else you'd, because we're kind of up to the sort of hour mark now, is there anything else you'd like to, like with the conservation things, or with Marwell, from what you know about that as we kind of wrap it up, what sort of things are Marwell, the money that we pay to Marwell, where would that sort of go in a sense? What would it do, and why do you think it's one of the things people should be doing, essentially?
I think that most people in general should be like thinking further into the future. Like, if they want to save species, they should. Like, so many people will boast that they love tigers. Well, then instead of saying it, start doing something about it, because if we don't do something soon, all of the animals are going to be gone, and pretty much the humans will go along with them, and that's what people seem to forget. So all I really want to say is from this is to try and get as many people to save the animals, and just try and start giving them the respect they deserve, because they've been on the planet longer than us. They deserve it a bit more.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And so with that in regard as well, what is your opinion on two things, which is human intervention with the breeding programs? So with one example I like to use, pandas. I love pandas, they're great, but they are terrible at mating. If we just left them to it, they'd be extinct. So, like, what's your opinion on sort of that side of things? In like, should we try our best to kind of save everything, or should it be, yeah...
Unfortunately, I know it sounds very harsh, but if it's something that's not really benefiting to the ecosystem, or if it's like something that just won't breed in general, there's nothing physically we can do about it. So I reckon the animals that aren't willing to adapt and survive, just let them go naturally. But I'd rather them go naturally instead of like the black rhino where they've just been shot all to death.
Yeah, because I think, I remember hearing about, as you said, obviously the black rhino earlier, we mentioned that, and I saw online there was a thing which was basically saying there was one male, I think, left in the world or something like that, and it was basically like one male left that wasn't sort of in captivity essentially in the world. And then I remember seeing pictures of it having like people around it, like armed guards, like trying to stop poachers from getting it because people were just so selfish. And there's been a couple of times where there's an elephant, I think, I saw a while ago, where I think someone killed an elephant and they basically cut off like a few inches of ivory and they just left it. And it's just like, he didn't use the meat, which elephant meat apparently can be quite good for, especially a lot of people in Africa. You know, if you're going to kill an animal for ivory, I strongly disagree with the moral decision, but you don't take a tiny amount of the ivory, you take it all. If you're going to, unfortunately, do something that's unpleasant, you have to try and utilize it all and things like that. So I agree with you in the sense that we should, try and help, sort of other animals as well, but the amount of poaching and the other things that it's like, I think the line is when the humans are directly the cause of the endangerment, then we should intervene in the sense of stop doing that. We need to help. But when it is certain animals which are just like, the panda, just kind of leave them to it in a sense. And I think probably the only thing I'll ask, the final thought I think I've got really is with creatures that have already been extinct, for example the woolly mammoth. What are your opinions on if they would bring that back? Like, are you for or against that sort of thing?
I'd be against it only because they went extinct for a reason. They were adapted to cold climates and their actual grass was different and all that kind of stuff. It's like, say, if they brought the Tasmanian wolf back, they would have no land for it. They would end up killing livestock and it would just be back to square one, being overhunted again. Yeah.
Well, with dinosaurs, for example, it's a nice Jurassic Park question. Would you, for research or human entertainment purposes, obviously granted, if we ignore the catastrophic things that happen in every single film, would you be with like dinosaurs, because no one had ever seen dinosaurs? Obviously woolly mammoths would be awesome to see, but they are basically just really big elephants with fur on. But with something that's so different as a dinosaur, are you still in the mindset of rather not bring it back because it's gone for a reason, or would there be certain exceptions where you'd almost like to see some?
I'd probably have something like the Galapagos Islands used to be. If there was an island where it was restricted, that no human could ever go there, and if they were, they'd be shot on sight, I'd put dinosaurs there. Yeah. Because then you could have, like, satellites to see them, but people wouldn't actually go on the island to risk their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's that line of, as we touched on earlier, it was, the zoos used to be kind of important for people to learn about animals because you didn't have the internet. But now when everyone's got, like, you can just Google name of an animal on video, and I don't think there's any animals I've ever looked up which I haven't found online. I mean, they basically give footage of everything now. So I think zoos are an important thing for the conservation side of things, and that I think, as you said earlier, with wrapping it up, it's kind of like zoos can be important as long as the animals are in good conditions. Obviously it creates jobs for people, which is really good, and it is an entertainment thing which humans do generally need, as well as being educational. But it is the fine line, because you do often see certain big cats, I think, are the main issue, which unfortunately they are one of the ones that are getting poached the most, are the ones that have got such small cages. They just look miserable, but then you let them out and they get killed because people ruin things. So there's one other thing as well, actually I just remembered, which was owls. Do you know about the eye colour thing with the variance in eye colour?
Yeah.
You could say that then, because I don't know that. I remember it vaguely, but like.
Yeah, as I've been in the falconry, I've learned about 3 types. So your barn owl that has all the black pupils, you know that they're fully nocturnal, so they're built for like flying in the night and hunting in pitch black.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that have orange-like eyes, they're more for like dusk, dawn, just before the sun rises. And then you've got your ones with the yellow eyes that hunt during the day.
Yeah, and I remember because I was at I went to a zoo in Cornwall. I can't remember exactly which one it was, but there were dinosaurs in there as well. It was like a dinosaur park sort of thing. It's quite cool. Not literal real dinosaurs, I want to clarify to people. It was like, it was when you go to Potton's Park or something, you walk through, there's loads of things, dinosaurs, and some of them are like got animatronics and things. And they had a little facts and things around. And I remember seeing on a plaque thing, and it said, yeah, yellow day, and then orange dusk, and then black night. And I was like, that makes so much sense. Just like it's quite nice for once with nature, where it's like it's almost yellow is easy to remember because of the day, orange evening, sort of black night. So I remember seeing that and being like, that's really cool. I remember that just as we were wrapping up. So yeah, we've been chatting for about an hour now. So I think it's probably goodish time to wrap up, I'd say. I mean, is there anything in particular that you'd like to add on top of anything we've discussed?
Not really. All the stuff I wanted to talk about has pretty much been said.
That's perfect. Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, I'll put a link. Obviously, we're from the south of England, so Marwell is from down south. But what I'll do is I'll include a link to the to Marwell and some of the sort of more information they do with the conservation and things. And then, yeah, hopefully down the line when you've done a bit more falconry and things in a couple of years or something, you can come back on and we can learn a lot more about sort of more about birds and things. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. It's been great to chat with you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
And that's the end of the podcast. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. Next week, I'm likely going to be releasing my episode with Frank of the Ragbag podcast. He talks about his podcast a little bit and what got him into podcasting, but he actually wanted to talk about his own epilepsy and his story of how he found out he's epileptic. And there's a few misconceptions around epilepsy, especially involving people having seizures or strobe lights and things like that. So it's a real interesting podcast to learn about that. But yeah, when that comes out next week, obviously you can glance at the description of the episode and see if it sounds like something you fancy. And the weeks after that, I'm not really sure what order I'm going to release the episodes in. I've got recorded and I have got upcoming for recording, so we'll have to see about that. So I don't think there's really much else to add. If you liked this episode with Belynda, be sure to check out a couple of the episodes I've done with her brother Wayne. He's a paleontologist, and I did a podcast with him and Josh a few weeks back, and I did one with him a couple of months ago about paleontology and his books, because he's an author as well. So be sure to check those out. As I said, his name is Wayne Telford. And that's about it, really. So, be sure to like us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. On Instagram especially, I post more photos and more context to a lot of the episodes and stuff. So be sure to check that out. Subscribe to us on the usual podcast platforms if you really like what you hear and you want to hear some more varied, interesting, and honest conversations. Yeah, I think that's about it. And, review us on iTunes if you feel like it deserves it. You don't have to write a whole review. You can just, give us the star rating that you feel like we deserve. If you feel like it's anything under a 5-star, maybe just leave it till you've changed your mind. Obviously, I do appreciate honesty, so any criticism is welcomed. But yeah, I think that's about it. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys, and I'll talk to you all next week.